Welcome to Outside Views EU. Today we're diving into an issue that's perhaps lesser known but deeply impactful. Brexit's effect on voting rights for British nationals residing in the European Union. For years, British nationals across the EU enjoyed certain democratic rights. They could participate in local elections, sometimes even vote in European parliamentary elections, but Brexit has changed the landscape entirely. So what has Brexit actually meant for voting rights for Brits in the EU? Let's start with some background. Before Brexit, the UK was part of the European Union and British citizens enjoyed rights granted under EU law. One key aspect of these rights was the ability to vote in local and occasionally European elections in the country where they resided. For many British nationals living in EU countries, these rights were invaluable. They allowed Brits abroad to engage in the communities they've come to call home. However, Brexit placed these rights on the chopping block. With the UK's exit from the EU, British nationals found themselves stripped of the automatic right to participate in these democratic processes, and this shift created a significant gap in the representation for British nationals in the EU. The change wasn't just a loss of a vote, it was a loss of voice. Let's break down what this means in different types of elections. First, local elections. Previously, British citizens residing in EU countries could vote and even stand for election in local government positions. This meant that they could have a say in decisions affecting their local communities, things like city council decisions, local policies, and regional projects. Post-Brexit, however, that right has evaporated unless a specific bilateral agreement between the UK and the host country is in place. So far, only a few countries have established these agreements. Spain, Portugal, Luxembourg, and a handful of others have agreed to let British nationals continue participating in local elections. But this isn't consistent across the EU. In countries without these agreements, British nationals have lost their local voting rights entirely. And this leaves many feeling disenfranchised in their adopted communities. Next, we have national elections. While voting in national elections wasn't generally available to Brits living in the EU before Brexit, there were some exceptions depending on the individual country's policies. Now, though, with Brexit, British nationals no longer qualify under EU treaties for any voting rights tied to EU citizenship. And that brings us to an essential point. Brexit has effectively erased Brits from EU-level political participation. For those who have lived in Europe for years or even decades, this can be particularly frustrating. Many British nationals in the EU found themselves essentially stateless in terms of political representation. While they may still vote in UK elections, maybe, the UK government doesn't always represent their specific interests abroad. And this shift has led to a feeling of isolation for many. They live in countries where they contribute to society and the economy, yet they lack a say in its governance. Some British nationals have even decided to seek citizenship in their host countries to regain some political rights. For example, British nationals in France or Germany have opted for dual citizenship and have been able to participate in those countries' local and national elections. But dual citizenship isn't an option for everyone, and the process can be long and complicated. Furthermore, Brexit has had ripple effects even beyond voting rights. Without a vote, many Brits feel as though their voices have been sidelined on issues that directly affect them: healthcare access, residency rights, employment opportunities, and more. Some EU member states have tried to address these gaps with special arrangements, allowing British nationals some limited rights. However, these agreements vary widely and don't cover every Brit in the EU. In a post-Brexit world, British nationals living in the EU are left to navigate a new reality where their role in the community is somehow both integral and invisible. Some argue that the UK government should do more to negotiate voting rights for Brits abroad, but so far there's been little progress. And meanwhile, British nationals in the EU are finding alternative ways to make their voices heard. Some have joined local advocacy groups and others participate in expat networks. But if they're immigrants, they're not expats. But the lack of formal vote remains a profound loss. Ultimately, Brexit's impact on voting rights is a clear example of how political decisions in one country can ripple out, affecting individual lives across borders. It raises questions about representation and belonging, about how we define community, and about the rights we often take for granted until they're gone. So as the years go on, the issue is likely to remain a pressing one for British nationals in the EU. Because when a vote is lost, so too is a crucial piece of democratic engagement. Brexit's impact on voting rights doesn't end with lost elections and representation. It also impacts how British nationals feel about their place in Europe and their ties to the UK. For many, Brexit has been more than just a legal or political change. It has been a personal and emotional one. Imagine living in a place for years, contributing to its community, paying taxes, yet losing the basic democratic rights to influence your surroundings. For some, this loss has intensified their resolve to stay and seek out ways to rebuild what was lost. For others, it has sparked a difficult question: should they move back to the UK or try to obtain full citizenship in their adopted countries? In countries where citizenship isn't possible or dual nationality isn't permitted, Brits face even tougher choices. Ultimately, the question of voting rights for British nationals in the EU is about more than just access to the ballot box. It's about feeling seen and heard, knowing that the community you contribute to respects your voice. It's about representation that feels inclusive, that doesn't hinge on nationality or legal agreements alone. Brexit has shown a light on how much these rights matter and what it means when they are taken away. For many, the journey toward regaining a voice in their communities may be ongoing, filled with hurdles and hard decisions. But one thing is clear: Brexit's impact on voting rights has reshaped what it meant to be a British national in the EU in ways that will be felt for generations. And as the landscape of Europe and the UK continues to evolve, British nationals abroad will likely continue to advocate for their rights and their role in the communities. And if you want to see another video, the next one is right here in the end screen.